know what I did, dude? I just did this. And
Tell me.
I get inspiration, honestly, from directors and people that take chances and encourage. Like, I told Quentin this because I heard him say this, and I've heard you say this even more so, which is when you tell people, like, go fucking make shit, man.
Yeah.
Like, you can just, you made Clerks for like 30 grand or whatever.
27,575.
How the fuck did you do
In
that?
1993, bitch. Nang.
And by the way, just so I get this straight, like, when you do that, I mean, obviously people must be like, well, yeah, people do that. You're a fucking crazy person. Good luck. I mean, when
Nowadays, it seems crazier because they're like, you spent how much? What'd you do with all the money? Because you could literally make a feature for
don't
like way
tell me
less
that,
on
because
an
I'm about
iPhone.
to tell you something that's going to fucking make you weep.
What
so,
is
wait though. So you take this thing.
Yeah.
Like when you first show it, because like I remember hearing about it, and like I said,
By the time you heard about it, it had been picked up.
it
was
picked
a
up,
thing.
and I'm crying, laughing at the dialogue. It's so funny, and like and part of the thing that's so like refreshing and fun about the film when I first saw it is that it is unlike the dialogue you hear in movies, right? And you're like, oh yeah, this guy got to make his own movie, because you go to a studio movie at the time, you're not going to see that dialogue, you're not going to see that story, and
we can talk about
you having to compromise
Snowball
by
and
how
shit.
you shoot it, but like the movie's so original and fresh. But when you show it to somebody right after that,
Right.
what's the reception?
The first time we showed it publicly was at a thing called the Independent Feature Film Market, which was run out of the Angelica Film Center up in New York. It was a marketplace, not a film festival. So you pay for a slot, and you try to pack it with as many potential distributors, exhibitors, whoever can help it move the needle forward. Hopefully somebody to buy it. So I had read an article about Richard Linklater having done that with Slacker, and Slacker was the movie that I saw shot right here in Austin, Texas. Spiritual home to my filmmaking career because Slacker was made here. I went and saw Richard Linklater's Slacker at the Angelica Film Center, and I viewed it with a mixture of awe and arrogance. Awe because I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. Arrogance because I was like, if this counts as a movie, I think I could make a movie too, having no experience or anything like that. So when I make the flick, the only plan I have is not Sundance, because that's where movies in color with movie stars go. The most famous Sundance movie at that point was Sex, Lies, and Videotape. It was shot in color and had Andy McDowell in it. So that festival was never in the cards for me, although that would be the festival that would change my life. I was just going to this marketplace because that's what Richard Linklater did. So the first screening we had was on October 3rd at 11 a.m., 1993. Me and Scott Mosier, my producer, had gone to a bunch of other screenings during the week, and they're all fucking packed. Man, we sat on the floor to watch this movie, The Making of And God Spoke. There was a movie called Clean Shaven by Lodge Kerrigan, which was a real festival hit. That was fucking packed. So we thought our screening's going to be packed. And the whole time I was like, they must know that Clerks is quality because they put us on Sunday at 11 a.m. after everything's fucking done, man, the day off. That's got to be a prime spot. Turns out it's the absolute worst spot. Nobody goes to the IFFM on a fucking Sunday. So our screening was me, Scott Mosier, my producer, Brian, Jeff, Marilyn, Lisa, who were in the movie, my friend Ed, Dave Klein, who shot the movie, Kristen Mosier, Scott's sister, and that was about it. Basically people that worked on the movie.
That was it.
And two other people. There's one, there's two people. There's a couple, then there's a man by himself sitting up in the front row, and then there was a lady who I didn't see where she was sitting, but she's who I dealt with after the screening. When I go into that screening, I'm expecting full house. When I walk in and see nobody, that is the end of my future. Like, at this point, I'm cruising on the volition of passion, getting Clerks made, and I have no money. I come from a poor family and shit like that, still spitting glue, pulling it together and whatnot. And this was meant to be the place where it's like, bam, this is where it happens. You graduate and all your dreams come true. And I walked into that screening and had to sit there for the first 15 minutes watching this movie and judging it for the first time. I'm like, oh my God, it looks like it was shot through a fucking glass of milk. It's so fucking murky. And like, also, why does everyone keep cursing? Like, everyone keeps cursing. It's just so fucking unbelievable. I thought that I could pull this off. I was like, I'm going to be in debt for the rest of my fucking life. This is the worst fucking idea. About 15 minutes into the screening, I was able to cognitively reframe it, where I was like, you know what? if you went to NYU Film School, it would have been 40 grand for 1 year. You only spent 27 grand. You know how to make a movie now. So this money, yes, that sucks, but you got a job. You just have to get another job and you pay it off, because I put it all on credit cards and shit. I was like, and make sure you do that. And then when you pay it off, you have to promise that you'll do this one more time before you die, because you loved who you were when you were making this movie. You knew for the first time exactly who you were supposed to be.
Yeah.
So don't sell out on this just because it didn't fucking work and your dream didn't come true. So that was the very first screening of Clerks. When it was over, Scott Mosier talked to some guy, an older man who had a badge that didn't indicate he was from New Line or Miramax or whatever. I was pulled aside by this girl who goes, it's very like New York, downtown New York. She was just like, you made this movie? I was like, yeah. She goes, you know people like the people in this movie? And I was one of them, and surrounded by them in the cast. And I was like, I guess a little. And she goes, I have this theory that all the Nazis who ever died are reincarnated, and that's what populates New Jersey.
Whoa.
And I was like, oh, all right. And she goes, well, I guess I'll give you my headshot. And she gave me her fucking headshot. That was the first reaction that I had to fucking Clerks.
That's memorable.
Scott Mosier talked to Bob Hawke, who was like, you should submit this to Sundance. He was like, I work with Sundance. This is a total Sundance movie. You should think about submitting to Sundance. But we didn't know who he was and what he mattered to Sundance. So it was just sounding like an old guy saying, you should do a thing, and then fucking walking away. So that whole day, there was a good 24 hours of me going, I made this thing and I didn't consider the consequences until now. And here are the consequences. Like, the road is dead and nothing's going to happen. I'm going to watch this movie once a year on a VHS copy just to remember the worst decision I ever fucking made and shit. And then the next morning, I got a phone call from this woman named Amy Taubin, who wrote for The Village Voice. And I had her article that was framed on my wall. And it was about Richard Linklater and how he had played at the Angelica at the IFFM. So she calls up and she's like, I'm looking for Kevin Smith. I was like, who's this? And she says, this is Amy Taubin. I was like, come on, man, don't fucking do this to me. And she says, what are you talking about? I was like, who told you to call? Brian Johnson? Somebody put you up to this? I thought it was one of my friends making her make a prank phone call and shit. Because I was like, who else would know the exact fucking name that would make me go like, what?
Yeah.
So I thought they were trying to pull one over on me. And she was like, this is so disturbing. I've never had somebody debate me on who I am. And she was like, I was like, you're really Amy Taubin. She goes, yeah, I called the number in the catalog, in the IFFM catalog. Your father answered, because it was my home phone number. And he said that, like, he couldn't believe somebody was interested in his son's movie, and he gave me this number to call you.
I can't believe you want to.
That's my dad. He's just like, what? Somebody likes my son's movie?
You sure?
So I was like, if this is really Amy Taubin, I got an article that you wrote hanging like right next to me. I'm looking at it right now, reels and deals and shit. And she's like, oh, this is going to be the easiest interview you've ever done. I was like, this is going to be the first interview I've ever done. And she was like, oh, I want to talk to you about the movie. Can you get me a copy? I heard it was the undiscovered gem of the marketplace. There was a call that came 5 minutes after that. There's a guy named Larry Kardish who ran New Directors, New Films, which is the sister film festival to the New York Film Festival. You could only play it once. He was like, I hear this movie is a movie that I must see. And I was like, who told you this? He's like, I'm not at liberty to say. That guy programmed the movie. We played at New Directors, New Films, and they program a short before your film. And the short also has to be a first-time feature, first short film. So Clerks had a short that played before it that was called Ice Cream. Do you know who directed it?
Louis C.K.
Bang.
I've seen Ice Cream.
He was also the same screening slot. Was Louis? That's the first time I ever saw him. So the third call I got was Peter Broderick, who wrote for Filmmaker magazine. He'd written an article that we use because people didn't tell their budgets back then. It wasn't like the internet where you could find anything out. There was no fucking internet. So nobody talked about their budgets. You didn't know how much a fucking thing cost because everybody then wanted to sell their movie for more. So they didn't want to tell you how much it cost. So it's tough to get information. Filmmaker had published an article on 3 movies and their budgets. The Laws of Gravity by Nick Gomez, Greg Araki's The Living End, and a movie called Together Alone, the director of which I always forget. It broke down what everything cost. That was useful information. For the first time, it was like, okay, renting a camera should cost roughly this. Film stock should cost roughly this. This was all information that wasn't readily available, but the difference between making a thing and not making a thing. If we'd waited 10 minutes, YouTube would have happened and fucking everybody can make a fucking thing.
Sure.
But this was back when you're like, we got to rent a 16 millimeter camera in order to make
how do we
movie?
do this? Yeah.
So in the beginning, it was very like, you know, the first screening of the movie was a disaster, but within 24 hours of that first screening, all these calls started happening. That guy, Peter Broderick, he called up to be like, I want to use your movie in this year's piece in the magazine, the same piece that we used to budget our movie. And I was like, who told you about this movie? Nobody was there.
And by the time I see it, meaning like, I don't remember exactly.
Sundance. You see it post Sundance, probably 94, 95.
Like, your world has changed at that point, right?
Yes and no. I'm the flavor of what I thought would be the month, but it was definitely a fucking year of people being like, hey, this fucking movie.
Yeah.
Movie traveled from January 94, went to a bunch of festivals, and then came out theatrically in October of 94.
Mm-hmm.
So I enjoyed almost a full year of the festival circuit and stuff. When the movie came out, it was a true art house movie, only played in the cities, open New York and LA, never played on more than 50 screens total at any given time.
But it goes huge on video?
That's where a lot of people discover it. So like in theaters, I had the critics and highbrow audiences and stuff, city audiences.
Yeah.
When it went to home video, that's when it found its real audience.
It's real audience.
And by that point, we were working on Mallrats. And like we had a screening of Mallrats at San Diego Comic-Con 1995. And Jay and Silent Bob came out on screen and the audience went nuts. And I was like, how the fuck did they know? And it was because Clerks was on home video by that point.
Oh, right.
So enough people were like, oh, I know those fucking guys. They're
yeah.
from the other movie. And that's a feeling I've been chasing ever since. Like every night we go out on this tour, there's 7 stops left, right? I got a show here tonight. Then I go to some other fucking San Antonio. Then I go to Phoenix in a week, and then Boston and Hartford. Then we're done. So 52, or right now it's been 49 or 48 times that we've shown the fucking flick. Every night, it's like going to a church where the congregation believes that I'm both the priest and Jesus at the same time.
That's pretty rad, dude.
It is unfucking believable. It is I don't know if this is the term jerry-rigged racially insensitive?
Let's go for it.
Jerry-rigged.
Yeah.
It's a very jerry-rigged system. Like I realized early on, the game is too expensive.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a guy that makes movies very inexpensively. Marketing costs $20 million. Doesn't matter if your movie costs $100,000 or $100 million.
Yeah.
Minimum marketing of a movie getting into theaters is $20 million.
Yeah.
When you're a guy who's like struggling to keep the budget down for $5 million, and then they just throw $20 million in marketing, it's just repugnant. You're like, it's fucking disgusting. I could have used that money and make a better movie, pay people, all these people, and I'm like, please do it for nothing. I could have a facility that looks like this fucking place.
Thank you for watching that highlight here from YMH Studios. That was a highlight or a clip, whichever word you prefer. You watched it, and there are so many more little bite-sized episode things. They're just click them. Maybe it's someone screaming or bleeding. Maybe it's just laughing at someone, making fun of them.